Good afternoon to you. Mark Stott with HurricaneTrack.com. It is Tuesday, the first day of February 2022. That's hard to believe. Where did January go? Well, for me, it was very busy. I was gone for 4 different winter storm events in the month of January, my busiest January off-season outside of the hurricane season in my career. I really started going out into these winter storms as part of the overall HurricaneTrack universe in 2014 with the encouragement of a good friend of the project. His name is Steve. He really encouraged me to start going into the winter storm scene back in 2014, and I did that. He was encouraging me before that, but I started doing it in 2014. And here we are, all these years later, really accomplishing some good things. I'll talk about that at the end of the update today. I have a few people I want to thank. And just to generally summarize what was accomplished in New England for that big wicked storm. All right? That's my best New England that you're going to get. So let's get on with it. We got some stuff to talk about. It is the off-season version of the hurricane outlook and discussion. So related to that is some talk about what we can look for the upcoming hurricane season. That's the crux of what we do here. And then we get to some winter weather stuff, lower 48 weather, and we'll do that as well today. So first, though, a stop to our friends down under at the Queensland government, the Long Paddock website. Why? Well, we're going to take a look at the SOI, Southern Oscillation Index. This pressure reading index that we have tells us the state of the overall atmosphere. And when these numbers are high and strongly positive, like today's contributor, plus 21, that's a pretty good number there. And then the 90 days at plus 9, the 30 days plus 3. When these are all strongly and consistently positive, we are typically in a La Nina, and when they are negative, especially consistently and strongly negative, we're typically in an El Nino. And it has to do with the pressure patterns across the tropical Pacific, between Darwin in Australia and over in Tahiti. All right? So lately, we've had some really strong positive numbers here as of the last several days after a period of some strongly negative numbers that showed up for a period of time there. There was like some minus 20s in there. And so we had a dip. You see this dip here that occurred, but we are definitely on the rebound here. And what does that mean for the upcoming hurricane season? Well, we look at this as it relates to how the net flow of air is across the tropical Pacific. And then a strong SOI signal, it's just one of different variables. It's not the variable, but it's one of them, and when it's strongly positive, we typically see a La Nina setup. So there's nothing in this right now as we get into February that would suggest that we're headed towards El Nino conditions. Rather, a continued moderation of the La Nina that's been in place, the abnormal cooling of the Pacific. If El Nino is the abnormal warming, then the opposite is the La Nina. And we're still in that pattern, although it is loosening its grip down here. We're starting to see gradual warming at the surface and the subsurface. There's a lot of complex mechanisms involved, but this is going to just gradually shift towards a more neutral pattern over here, while at the same time the Atlantic stays warm. The main development region through here, quite a bit warmer than the long-term average. And we've had a lot of cold air draining down off the North American continent. So the shelf waters in some parts of the Gulf have cooled off to cooler than normal, or cool anomalies as we call it. But by and large, the Gulf, especially in the central Gulf right there, the loop current and vicinity, still has that one area of substantially warmer than normal water temperatures, and that is going to help to continue to provide energy to these storm systems as they sweep through the lower 48, and we're going to get this big ice storm, the big snow totals coming up for the plains and points north and east from there. We'll take a look at that in just a moment, but this is part of that, the Gulf contributing to that, and it's always warm enough for hurricane season. Make no mistake about that. And we look to see if it's really warm early, maybe we'd get some early season development, but overall the Gulf always going to be warm enough for intense hurricanes. The main things that we watch would be the ENSO state, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, and the state of the overall tropical Atlantic, especially right down here, which currently, this particular setup, if it were to hold, would favor an above average hurricane season coming up. But we know things change. They don't stay static. All right, a few different perspectives here. The gradient, the difference in temperature over distance, is increasing a little bit We're starting to see a little bit more of these isotherms packed in here, especially down here off the Carolinas. Wow, those are some densely packed isotherms in there, lines of equal temperature. In fact, let's zoom in on that. What does that mean? Well, look, you see 24 Celsius in the Gulf Stream, and then these purples in here in the Pamlico Sound. Let's scroll down to the legend. We're getting close to 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. So in the lower 30s Fahrenheit, yikes. It's hard to believe the Pamlico Sound getting into the 30s water temperature-wise. But it's true. We're talking about lower to mid to upper 30s along most of the East Coast now because we've had winter. It's been a few years since we've had a substantial winter. You remember 2015, that was a big winter season. 16 and 17 had their share, but really 18, 19, 20, 21, we're in the winter of 21, 22 now, of course, but 20 and 21, those winters were generally lackluster in terms of these big winter storms and deep, cold Arctic outbreaks. Not the case this year, and it looks like it'll continue. February is like September is to the hurricane season for winter storms, so remember that. February is the peak month for winter storm activity. Now, this continues to just blow my mind. The 26 degrees Celsius isotherm strong in the Gulf of Mexico. It's now February. Once we get into March, these temperatures should start to come up naturally as part of the cycle back towards the summer and the spring and summer months. The big ball of fire in the sky that we know of as the sun, that incoming solar radiation, what we call insolation, those protons and photons or whatever they are. I know a little bit about it, but that energy, that's the word. We'll just keep it simple. Energy gets stored in the ocean, and the upper ocean heat content starts to go up. But this is remarkable, these very warm water temperatures, especially out in the deep portions of the Gulf, and that'll continue to fuel our winter storms. And then it's not going to be too long, starting next month, just a month away now, we'll start to talk about spring severe weather. That's not too far away. All right, so related to the SOI and the ENSO state, El Nino Southern Oscillation, we have forecasts. And the CFS still, that's the climate forecast system, kind of insisting, if you will, that we will stay in La Nina through the heart of the hurricane season, which would be roughly in this time frame right through here. And this will start moving to the left with time as we move out, right? October will slide over to the left, and then you'll have November and December and so forth. So we're getting a little closer now. This is the peak of the hurricane season in here. And right now, today, February 1st, that's when this was updated, the CFS indicating that the mean, the average, would be substantially enough below neutral there, or zero, that we would still be in a La Nina state. Just something to keep in mind. It's a complex setup. We've got what's called the spring predictability barrier coming up. There are other models. It's not just the CFS that kind of forecast this signal. The Euro, there's NASA, GFDL. There's a lot of different models and different agencies that keep track of this, and we can look at averages and means and trends and whatever. But I like to look at this and see if there's anything that the CFS is obviously missing. It's been very consistent over the last few weeks, since December, that gradually these numbers have been going down. And to that end, look, the blues right here, there's a dense grouping of them. Those are the latest 8 members. There's only a couple of them up here, that are on the north side of the mean. The rest of them are on the south side or negative side. And that's a pretty good clustering. A lot of the latest members are even colder than the ensemble mean. What is the CFS seeing? I don't know. I don't have the CFS expert that's diagnosing all this stuff on the line and ready to go to talk to. Now, that'd be pretty cool. You know what? Let's just call him up and see what we can find out. Or she, whoever it is, or they. It's probably a team of people, wouldn't you think, to run something as complicated as one of these forecast models for climate, for goodness sakes. Now, speaking of climate, we go from our friends in Australia to our friends in the Great North, or the Great Cold North. There's a phrase, I can't remember what it is. So we'll just call it Canada. And why Canada? Well, because we're going to look at one of the products that comes out of their weather service, if you will, and it's the CANSIPS. What is the CANSIPS? Well, it is the Canadian Seasonal to Interannual Prediction System. All right, CANSIPS, right? CAN for Canada, and then the Seasonal to Intraseasonal Prediction System. CANSIPS, that's why we call it that. And I'll put a link to this particular right here, that link in the description of today's video if you want to read more about it. Why? Because it's important, because it shows interesting stuff over the next several months. Disclaimer, this is not, and you know this, hopefully, but I'm just telling you, this is not verbatim, locked in, written in stone, whatever you want to call it. This is just what this CANSIPS model, which is made up of a bunch of ensembles, etc. You got to read about it. I'll give you some homework. You read about it to understand it better. But this is what it's showing today. It updates at the beginning of each month. So as of February 1st, this is what the sea surface temperature anomaly, based on the 1981 to 2010, so it's a little dated. It's got a little further back in time background state. I think the newest one goes to 2020 and then back 30 years, right? So this might be a little off. I don't know. Again, people smarter than I might know this, but hey, it's on Tropical Tidbits from Dr. Cowan. We trust that it's the latest and greatest available data. So what does it show? Well, this is March sea surface temperature anomalies, April, May, June, July, August, September. And that's as far as we need to go for the most part. Generally speaking, not a screaming, like everybody go buy all the generators you can get your hands on, whatever. For the hurricane season, this is not your classic, oh my gosh, this is it. We're all going to have 50 hurricanes to deal with. That's not what this shows with the sea surface temperature pattern. Why? Pretty cold up in the northeast Atlantic up here. The classic AMO, or Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation, horseshoe look of warmth, anomalous warmth, is not really there. It's not far off. Don't get me wrong, this is not a terribly negative look either, not at all. All of the water temperatures in the deep tropics are warm, the subtropics are warm, and then off the Iberian Peninsula up towards the western parts of the UK, in the northeast Atlantic, before you get to the waters off of Iceland. This is not the worst look, but it's not the best either. Again, this does not scream 20 name storms or more. This does tell me, all right, the potential is there, and this is September, that's where we ended this, for a busy season. 14, 15, 16 name storms, maybe 8 hurricanes. That's a good bet when you see something like this. That's reasonable. Now, what about, this is temperatures, what about the precipitation anomalies going out into time? This is March, and by the way, the greens gradient, or gradiating, or whatever you call it, is that even a word? The gradient here of greens down to blue are your denser, higher precipitation anomalies, all right? And what is the scale? This is in inches, all right? You don't usually see, what is that, imperial, I guess? Usually it's in metric. But anyway, this is in inches, and this is the March precipitation anomaly. So green to blue are higher anomalies, as you can see over here on the chart. And then your browns and yellows and whatever would be negative anomalies, lower than average precipitation. So let's scale this out. April, May, and this is interesting because May has this little look right here that perhaps there could be some Caribbean activity in May. Maybe. You don't want to start extrapolating this out too much. Your imagination can start running wild. It's a good guidepost. Here's June, kind of dry in the southwest Atlantic, it would suggest. Typical of a La Nina, by the way, that you would have dry conditions over here. And the La Nina, this is the precip anomaly, very low precipitation in the Pacific. So not much of a Pacific hurricane signal, by the way. And then July, a little bit of a signal in the main development region down here. Maybe some low riding stuff in the Caribbean towards Mexico. You could infer that a little bit. Then the peak months, August, that's a pretty substantial look there with the precip anomalies in the main development region. Up through here, there's a little channel, if you want to call it that, kind of sticks out a little bit. Again, it's more of just, looking out way into the future at some possibilities. Finally, September, October, just to give you a look ahead here, many months. But back to September, pretty solid signal for this area for the peak of the hurricane season with a pretty dense area over here. of precip anomalies, maybe another track cluster there, if you wanted to try to project what the tracks could be. That's not what this really helps with. It's more of a, okay, all these models are seeing these anomalies clustering in certain places. It's just something to keep an eye on. They run this again, we'll get it again in a month, and we'll see what it shows then. Maybe it starts to back off. Maybe stuff increases. Also, once we get to March and April, just so you know, the ECMWF, the UK Met, will have these same types of products as well as pressure anomalies, and we could look at that too, but I just wanted to do sea surface temperature and precip today. We'll get those other graphics and data sets from our good friend Ben Knoll in March or April. All right, so there you go. Let's look at now lower 48 weather. If you're in the extreme northern areas up here of North Dakota and Minnesota, you're under a blizzard warning. And all of this right here, that's your wind chill advisory color. Yee, that's got to be just, that's too cold. I was up here in Massachusetts working, and we got down to 4 degrees Sunday night, I think it was, when we were retrieving our equipment. And that was cold enough for me. Thank you very much. But anyhow, big area. I mean, really, this is significant. You know, millions of people under some kind of a watcher warning. And you see that in the media a lot. 230 million people or whatever it is. But this is very significant. A lot of people are going to be dealing with snow, sleet, and ice for several days over a wide corridor. And again, this affects things from planes, you know, our air travel, airports. The rail systems get impacted to some extent. Trucking, certainly the interstate travel of our truckers out there. And how many of those truckers did I see on the trip that I just took to New England? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands. And we just think about how the weather impacts that. Just that sector is amazing. And it's very impactful, and it can have ripple effects down through the economy, especially with things still kind of teetering as we move out of the pandemic and more into this endemic phase of what we've been dealing with COVID. You know, and I never in a million years would have thought that I would ever integrate talking about a pandemic with the weather. But here it is. And in this situation, it's the supply chain stuff, the truckers especially. This is a wide swath. So, you know, read into this, go to weather.gov. That's this site that I'm on right here, weather.gov. You can put your zip code in right there if you're geographically inclined and you know, hey, that's Missouri. I want to see what's happening in eastern Missouri. Boom, there you go. You can click on St. Louis. You get the forecast for St. Louis. You know, there's apps and lots of great private weather companies out there, but this is free. Well, you pay for it with your tax dollars, at least you should, and so take advantage of it. And then there's these forecast discussions that you can read right here. They give you the in-depth knowledge written by a real person. And they even put their initials at the bottom. This is the WFO. That's the Weather Forecast Office. I don't know who LSX is, but that's the initials of who wrote this, who authored it. So take advantage of this tool. It's out there. A very impactful weather event for a lot of people going over the next several days. And we can see that manifest itself here in the modeling here off the Tropical Tidbits site. Move this out into time, and you can see what happens. It starts to really get going. And by the way, there's pretty good high pressure offshore of the East Coast, and the wind flow around that. What is it going over? The very warm Gulf of Mexico. What does it do? It transports those high PWatt values, precipitable water, high QPF, quantitative precipitation forecast, fancy meteorological ways of saying that's a lot of snow and rain and freezing rain and sleet over a long period of time. And what is this? Huge chunk of Canadian Canadian air coming in from the north. I was thinking about that great white north or whatever I was trying to say. I will look it up when I'm done, by the way. What do they call Canada? But 1049 millibar high, I call that cold, coming out of Canada, sliding down into the lower 48. Dense cold air. The warmer, more buoyant, moisture-laden air rides over the top of that, and if the air column is cold enough all the way through, you get the snow. Otherwise, you get all this ice and sleet and freezing rain, and that is bad news especially for commerce. So that settles in the next 30 hours, and it's a long-term event, long duration, what I'm trying to say. Look at that. And the border right here, this line between heavy rain and heavy sleet and freezing rain. Wow, we're talking massive power outage potential here for our friends down here in areas that are not exactly used to it. And you remember what happened in Texas last year? Oh, you do. Could that be a repeat setting up here? That was also in February. This is nasty. It really is a very troubling look that's going to have impacts for people for several days. That slides east with some frozen precip and otherwise nastiness in New England, where I just was. Just not enough deep cold air for it to be all snow. Yeah, just a horrible weather week coming up for sure. And then we're out to 4 days, and then finally 5 days. There's another event. Look at that. 5 days out. Is it possible that I can have the 5th outing in my area? I live right down here in Wilmington. As we get another system trying to develop and maybe ride the coast, stay tuned. That's 5 days out. You know how it is with hurricanes. 5 days is a long time. We will see what happens. But the bottom line, winter is just going to keep on punching at us, and we got to be aware of it. Just stay on top of it. We've got a lot of stuff going on, at least related to the pandemic stuff. I hate talking about it, but we don't want to ignore it either. We are heading in the right direction from a lot of reasons. Hearing some positive news about case counts going down, etc. So at least let's get through it and then focus on the weather, because it's imminent right now, and we can see what's happening with these models and the people we trust with the weather forecast, etc. But a busy week coming up, maybe literally the next week or so. In fact, let's just take this out to a week. That's 5 days. There's 6. Yeah, maybe a little nor'easter action there. We'll see if that storm gets stronger in the modeling. We'll back it up a little bit. It's possible. So we'll watch for that going forward. All right. Before I exit with the old exit slide there, went up to New England starting Thursday with one of our supporters through Patreon. I met this guy. His name is Matt. He flew out from Denver. That's where he lives. And he helped to assist with this field mission that literally gave me a check on my bucket list of what I wanted to accomplish in eastern Massachusetts. Now, I've been up there before for big winter storms, 2015, 16, 17, and 18. Been a few years since I was up there for something substantial. I did a lake effect event in 2020, went out for one this year already, but this New England bomb cyclone that the Weather Channel named Keenan, which, by the way, I'm all for that. I think these big significant storms should be named and helps with awareness. It does. They do it over in the European Union or the UK Met or somebody. They do it in Europe, and it's called storm, whatever. Not my call. That's up to the Weather Service. But anyway, big impactful storm, and we accomplished a hell of a lot. We really did. I'm very happy with these results. Putting equipment through the help, and I want to thank some people, seriously. So Matt, and then our good friend Jeff Calderon from the Danvers area, this gentleman named Bill, and I never asked Bill how I say his last name, so let's call him Bill for now. He knows who he is. Gary and Dan and all the different people that we met up there that let us use their properties. Boston Jack showing us the way over there at the White Cliffs area near Plymouth. I mean, these people were phenomenal, and I got to meet in person Jack Sillen and his friends over at this house that they were staying in North Dennis, I think it was. Just the camaraderie and everybody working together, positive attitudes, no egos, it was just phenomenal. And we accomplished some stuff. We gathered video data, and video is data, of what happens when these coastal storms impact the coast. We see it, and it's exciting, and it gets the blood going, and it's a great shot for the Weather Channel or whatever. But in the end, where's the science in there? And we're able to extract that out later using time lapse or just looking at something over and over. You see a pattern. We actually got to measure the weather. We took wind measurements, and we tweeted some of this stuff and learned from it overall that eventually, what is all of this for? Well, we know it's only a matter of time. Is it this year? Is it next year? Is it 10 years? That another Carol or Edna or New England 38 hurricane comes rolling through, and we will be ready. That's what this sows the seeds for. This plants those seeds now. These winter storms matter not just for what we do in them and the impact that goes on and all the views that we get for our videos and the people oohing and ahhing over what they're seeing. It's planting the seeds for a future event that we're going to be able to handle it in the best way possible. Take more equipment. We have people we can work with, developing relationships. And so all the people that helped out with this, especially on the back end of my team between CJ and Mike Cornelius and Kari and Tim that does our graphics, I mean, just tremendous. And I got to meet a longtime follower and supporter up in Newburyport, Katie. I mean, just that interaction is unlike anything else. I really like this. And that's why we have a pretty small community overall, around 700 supporters on Patreon, maybe a couple dozen left over from the old HurricaneTrack premium services days before the age of the crowdfunding that we know of now through Patreon. And you know what? If it was 5,000 or 10,000, yes, I would have a tremendous source of funding and like a whole crew and a staff and probably an office space somewhere. Sure, that would be great. But then I would lose sort of this, like, it could get too big. You know what I mean? And so I'm very grateful for where things are and where we're going to be able to go with this. I really am. I just wanted to let you guys know that we really accomplished everything that I wanted to and more. And I'll start to show you this over time as I prepare some different videos and time lapses and so forth. I'll put them out there. All right? So if you want to become part of it, just follow along. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, those are the 3 social media platforms that we use the most. And you can certainly support it and literally be involved with it with Patreon. That's how we do it. Patreon.com, that's an app and a website where you can crowdfund and help to be involved directly. You can do the QR code if you want to, whatever. That's how you do it. We actually picked up a handful of new people during this mission, and I welcome you to our project. And we look forward to a lot of things going ahead in the next few months. Spring severe weather coming up. Hopefully, I can take a couple of weeks off, but it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to. I don't mean off like I don't do anything. I got documentaries I want to work on and podcasts to record, and these winter storms keep hindering that. But you know what? I love it. We are all kids at heart. We're all weather geeks at heart, whether we like it or not. Some people scoff at it, and they hate the winter, and they hate the bad weather. I get it. But you know what? Deep down in, you know that at least you have an interest in it, and the internet here kind of binds us and connects us in ways that we never could before. There's a lot of negativity through social media, but a lot of positive as well. You just got to know where to find it. And I'm glad you found me, and I'll use that to sign off. All right, let's get this sucker on YouTube for you. And Facebook as well. CJ does a good job with that, and I appreciate it very much. All right, that is it from me for the rest of the day. I got a lot of stuff to work on from here. You guys have a good rest of your Tuesday. I am Mark Stout with HurricaneTrack. I'll be back with more for you later in the week.